Next up, we have Romana with Expedia, Matthias with Kayak, and Amelia from VentureBeat, who is also the author of our AI Weekly newsletter. You should definitely subscribe to that.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I have to say I'm very excited for this panel because I like to think I'm a big traveler, but costs don't, my budget does not necessarily allow for it, so I do just look and see what's out there and dream. But so we're going to start, I'm going to ask both of you to introduce yourselves, but also answer the question, do you use agents in your platform, and why do you think the agents are working well with what you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Ramana Tumu. I joined Expedia about 6 months ago. I'm quite excited about this space because the intersection of travel, commerce, technology, now with the whole agentic AI, it's going to be even more exciting and interesting. So I'm super pumped. For us, AI agents, we have been using AI agents for quite some time now. We started with our service agent about 5 years ago. Today, every year, we do about 143 million service requests through our service agent. Half of those are answered by the agent, and remaining half are handed over to the human in the loop. And on the shopping and discovery, we actually introduced Romy agent. We have been iterating and experimenting quite a bit. And more recently, we are trying to bring both the service agent and the Romy under one roof, AI agent. We just launched it on hotels.com, which is one of our brands. And early days, beta, but like really interesting stuff.
Hi, my name is Matthias Keller. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Kayak. The behavior you described to look and never book, we call it snacking.
I love that term.
But about Kayak and AI, so what I think is interesting to mention is that we have a great history with VentureBeat, and we have actually been at Transform the first time in 2017. It was the same building, a different stage, and we showed voice hotel booking on Alexa. And so we are striving for this vision of, we all know how complicated it is to search travel. The less you know, the more work you have to do, all these places, all the dates, all your calendars. And so we're striving for this vision of that travel agent that is always available, that is agentic, powered by artificial intelligence. We are no longer announced on Alexa or any other voice assistant. This may change over time because we see how the technology jumped. This year in April, we launched our new testbed for agentic travel booking, which is called kayak.ai. It's a fully chat-based agentic experience that puts together the power of ChatGPT, many different tools. One of the tools is web search. We heard about that often today. And 20 different tools that we as Kayak provide. So a tool could be the flight search, the hotel search, the flight status, your trip. And so we are working towards our vision of having this fully personalized agentic experience that does all the heavy lifting for you when you plan travel.
What I think is very interesting is when AI agents, the very rudimentary start of that conversation, the example everyone used was, can you imagine if you had just your AI to book your travel for you? So it feels like that was the end goal for a lot of assistants and agent builders. But so it feels like we're just now seeing these benefits. But I want to hear from both of you, what exactly has changed in the field of like generative AI and AI agents in travel, considering that this is the space that's always been the example of what agents could do for humans? Anyone who wants to start?
I can start with saying what is still the same but much better. So when I go back to our Alexa experience, none of us really had to trust what will function and what will not function. So maybe we started, we know, okay, the timer works, the weather works, but for everything else, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. And I think in this new generation now with ChatGPT, we have seen that basically everything is possible. And that's, of course, an extremely high expectation, and to meet that is not easy. But we now really have that, as much as voice agents were sold in the millions, and you say reached mainstream as a really smart music player, I think we now also have the mainstream, or starting to see the mainstream of users trusting agentic workflows to do actually complicated things, which are not just setting a timer.
Because you don't want your kid saying, I want to go to Disneyland on Alexa, and then it books a trip to Disneyland, and you're like, no.
Yeah, from yeah, exactly.
I
From
tried to go to Disneyland a couple years ago, and the sticker shock was real. So,
yeah, from my standpoint, I think the whole discovery and inspiration will continue to happen in the traditional channels, be it Google or OTAs, but more and more that will move to these, new model providers like ChatGPT and like. And the expectation from the traveler will be more around, hey, I've done my discovery. How seamlessly can I complete my transaction, have a seamless experience, post booking? That will continue to be, one of the primary things that, companies like Expedia will back. But the most important thing and the shift I see will be happening is like, can we get the balance between the control the traveler will have and the control we give to the agent? Even though I have a personal AI agent, how much control do I want to give, and how much do we leave it with the traveler, and the configurability of that? To me, that's much more exciting.
yeah. That brings up a good point, that what are the unique challenges that you're faced? A lot of people are very familiar with both Expedia and Kayak. There's a certain way people use it. People use it in very different ways. I use it just for inspiration. Some people use it to actually, book things. But there are a lot of nuances within the travel space, especially when you talk about controls, but you're also talking a lot about finding all of these experiences, flights, hotels. What are the challenges connected to that in building an agent, or just specifically a travel AI platform?
Let me start with two viewpoints here. So the first is that this new generation of agents, in the previous generation, I would say we tried to put the web page into some sort of AI, but now we have the AI first way of building, which means that I can come in with questions that I couldn't ask before. And a simple example like to bring is that every hotel booking site out there can tell you that a hotel has a pool, but find me the site that can tell you that it's an infinity pool. This doesn't exist really yet today, but it's something you can ask through AI. That is something that ChatGPT does a great job, because they have a completely different way of thinking about it. And that's something we will have to adapt, and our users are not going to stay if we keep missing. We have to deliver. The second thing that I also find interesting here is that whenever I pitch the idea of Kayak AI to someone, they say like, oh wow, finally I can get this complex vacation plan without running all the searches. If you think about it as a computer scientist, you still soon get into this problem called the traveling salesman. It means like you have an infinite amount of choices to travel between even just 10 places. And our travel backends, if we think about airlines, hotels, or cars, they won't support that amount of compute to serve like a snacker request of what you want to do. So we have to still, as much as the AI makes everything possible, we also have to keep in mind that our availability to pricing calls and finding out if something is bookable is still limited, because there's still a high cost. And I'm sure you see that too.
I mean, absolutely. And I'll add on to that. Have you tried Expedia trip matching on Instagram?
I have to say, I have a specific place I normally try to see the prices for, and maybe in the future save up for it.
Yeah. The most exciting piece, going back to what I was saying, I think these inspirations, as they happen elsewhere, how do you catch that? I mean, Expedia trip matching is basically you go to Instagram,
You watch an
you are
influencer
watching a
travel the
travel
world.
reel, you get
Okay.
excited about it. We can put you through Expedia platform, and like have you close the trip planning and booking. The reason I'm bringing it up, that's how the behavior keeps changing. But the best part is like with the new Gen AI techniques, you can actually create real hyper personalization. I mean, that's the door for you, right? Using the scale and using the technology. To me, that's much more exciting.
On a slightly high level, how are you able to do that technically? Like, what are the technical challenges? Because these are, for example, for the Instagram, that that kind of crosses into you going from Expedia and you're looking at what your customers are looking at on social media. How are you able to build a lot of those connections, and also for Kayak, because there's also that personalization part of it. What were the technical challenges that you had to overcome in building all of the platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I can start off and Matthias can add. I mean, this is where the most interesting piece is like, how can you be seamless to the traveler, making sure the context the traveler is using on these different model providers are front doors, what I call, right? Previously the front doors, maybe 5 or 6, now we have a lot more front doors. How do we seamlessly capture the intent and then have the right integration between these providers, these front doors, to the backends that you have? And I expect a lot more interesting iterations that happen between these two to make sure at the end of the day we put traveler at the front, both on the model providers and the front doors, and providers like us, who provides rest of the experience in that example.
The way how I look at it to deliver the experience is that if we abstract that travel agent again as a multi-agent system, and so let's say there's one agent that knows about every place in the world, and another agent that really knows flight prices, another agent that knows about pools, right? we have to build the right multi-agent system, which of course has a lot of the routing challenge. What is, like everyone has in multi-agent, what is the right agent for this problem? But I think what is really going to be key, I'm very hopeful for personalization to 2 ways. So first of all, we often say in travel that if you think about the frequency, our frequency compared to Netflix and Spotify is unfortunately extremely low. Like you don't book a flight every day, sadly. But what we see in these new systems, there are 2 interesting ways how personalization can get much better. The first is that you now have all the way of saying what you want in your prompts. We no longer know like, oh, wow, in the classic way, we see, wow, somebody runs a lot of searches. Now you can say, actually, I'm planning a honeymoon with 20 people. But the other thing is that...
Honeymoon with 20 people.
Or maybe, yeah, well, or any other trip, as you like. But what we also have in the agentic system is not like just the multiple agents. We now also have to introduce the idea of memory. And memory could bring personalization to the next level, knowing all these things like simple things like no longer entering the age of your kids every time you start a search, but also more complicated things like really knowing your preference for restaurants, your preference for activities. I don't want to have roller coasters or whatever it is. And so when you say about the challenge, I think early technology, early days, of course, memory is something that I think is still on the roadmap that we haven't solved yet. But there's a lot of hope here that the technology, and as fast as it goes, that we really see this soon.
Can I add a little more to what Matthias was saying? While I agree that we have more sparse data in travel, but companies like Expedia, we have almost 30 years of traveler data in our database. We have trillions of data signals, right? And we have like 70 petabytes in our data lake. I think to me, the most exciting piece, how do you use these assets now, like really put them on steroids, like using the new technology to bring a very different kind of personalization to the traveler. To me, that's super exciting.
By the way, the seagull sounds really drive home the travel theme. But speaking of personalization, travel is very personal for a lot of people. They have a ton of preferences, as both of you have mentioned. How are you offering or figuring out how to offer even more personalization so that when people are maybe snacking or really actually booking their hotels, their flights, their cars, they actually find the ones that would make their trips valuable and memorable for them. What are you mentioned data. What are the data connections that you're doing to make personalization that much easier?
I can start here. I think when you think about booking a flight, I would argue that you may have a loyalty to a certain brand and you want to try to take that airline because it helps you with your points, but it is in a way very interchangeable experience. But when we now speak about hotels, you may see 5 hotels and none of them resonates with you at all, right? Or you may see 5 hotels and you want to book all of them. I think personalization here is really about, it starts with understanding, of course, like what did you previously book? What did you previously click on? What did you look on for the longest time? But personalization is not just only hotels. Personalization can also be things like giving you just a recommendation, knowing that you're in San Francisco today, it's cold, here are the 3 top things that you could do today. And we know that you really like museums and art, right? I think the personalization you experience today is mostly found in ranking, that when you and I search for hotels,
yeah.
that we see a different order. And in these AI systems, as much as I agree that there's the historic data, we have to find ways how we keep the memory by extracting the interesting tidbits about what matters to you and carry that forward in every request you make to get to the best results. Because what is really important here is that if you go to kayak.com and you search for hotels, and same with any other site, you get, depending on the city, maybe 10,000 hotels. You see 25, 50 at a time. When you start a request with our Kayak AI agentic solution, you start with 3 hotels. And as much as you can ask for more, it's much, much more critical that we really nail it compared to letting you scroll and find something that you like further down the page.
The way, I mean, that's really good context. The way I would say, obviously you need to marry the data signals you have in your database. That's like foundational. And you will have a lot more real-time signals and context that user is giving you in the session, in the journey, travel journey. You want to be able to adapt and like use those signals. The second, third, and Matthias mentioned this too, like you booked the trip, you are traveling, and like, oh, you are supposed to go to an activity, but like you know it's actually going to rain.
Yeah.
Instead of going for surfing, recommend, companies like Expedia can go back and say, hey, you know what, Emilia, you booked for the surfing lesson. It's actually going to rain. Do you want to instead go to a museum and we have this ticket available? Can you close the transaction? I think to me, connecting the data that you have in the database to real-time in-session signals to post-book, like really paying attention to the traveler and being the companion and fail fast.
It sounds like there's going to be something more proactive, that it isn't just taking signals historically of what they've searched for. At the moment that they are searching, it is also dynamically like understanding that you are searching for an experience that will be outside, the weather will not be cooperating with that. So it's more proactive. So it feels for the consumer that it is personal in that way.
And it's true end to end. Like you are with the traveler throughout the journey, right? All the way from discovery, inspiration, search to your post-booking experience.
We've been talking around this idea of people changing how they search. Whether or not we believe that more people are going to be searching on Claude, ChatGPT, or Perplexity, their behaviors around search is changing. I know the last time I traveled for fun, I did all the normal things, used all my normal apps, but then I went to Gemini to ask for what can I do in London. And when I went to have a layover in Japan, I asked ChatGPT and Gemini, I was like, I have 4 hours. What can I do in 4 hours in Tokyo? those used to be things people would use Kayak and Expedia for, but they don't know how to ask for that. How has this changing world of search impacted how you're seeing users use your platforms, and how are you addressing them as well?
So this is a great segue on why we created, for now as an experiment, but also as a potentially new line of product for a long time, Kayak AI. So first of all, actually classic Kayak is not the greatest place to find out what you can do 4 hours in San Francisco. It is just not our focus. Our focus is really on flights, hotels, and cars. It's different for Expedia, as we know. But what is really interesting is that now with the chat. So let me give you the following example. Kayak, we have all kind of interesting tools. For instance, we have a tool called the cheapest time to travel. You know where you want to go, but you don't care if it's July or September. And now you may have considerations about weather, how busy is it going to be, what's the price. You can find this tool in our navigation on the site, but unfortunately it's like not right in the focus where too many people find it. Now, if I go to the Kayak AI tool, I no longer have the problem of finding it. I just ask for it. Similarly, when we come to the output, the way our web pages are structured is that, okay, this is a flight search page, this is a hotel search page, this is a car search page. When we now go over to the model of chat, like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Kayak AI, we no longer have these boundaries. I can just show you a flight, a hotel, and a car, or 3 different flight searches in the same conversation. And in the end, what I think now, coming back to the consumer behavior, I would expect that consumers, as much as it will be, I believe sometimes I think about something like a mall, right? Like, so you can definitely book your travel in Costco, but for some reasons, maybe you should go to the travel agent. But I think if you then go to this travel agent, the travel agent really has to know everything.
Yes.
So we can no longer say like, hey, we do flights, but we don't do this. We really have to offer the whole set of questions. And even if you just want to know how much is an espresso in Paris, we have to be able to answer that too. And the good news is, thanks to the combination of the agentic with, let's call it just ChatGPT and agent for a moment and all the knowledge and web search, we are now able to answer a lot more things than our web pages can answer.
Yeah, to me, actually, this one is a lot more exciting for Expedia because we have built a lot of capabilities just to service the customer. I mean, travel is so nuanced and so unique and so personal, right? You can do multimodal, like you can come, your entry point can be anything, and even on Expedia you can actually do all the prompts, like real prompts, not just the search and select the boxes. I think, like what Matthias said, the key is to make sure you can service that prompt, not losing the context from shopping to discovery to booking, all the way to your service. That's exciting. Second, what we have done at Expedia, we actually built a Gen AI playground. We have 60 models in that playground. We can actually apply different model for different experience. So just being that iterative and like really paying attention to the traveler and carrying that context is the winning combination.
Is it more you're playing around with the best model for a specific type of search query, or is it more you're playing around with how fast the model is? Why would you need to have that kind of garden?
Yeah, it's few different things. Obviously, like we may find model A responds much better in the search context versus model B in the service context. And most importantly, like we want to make sure the developers can iterate quite quickly, not just for traveler and partner use cases, for a lot of the internal use cases as well. So we are making it like really seamless and simple for them to experiment and swap the models. Obviously, these models are evolving almost every day. We just want to make sure we don't fall behind and have to re-architect and redo the framework. So we have come up with a really neat architecture to experiment with any model.
We have about less than 3 minutes, less than 4 minutes left. I was going to ask about these like untapped data pipelines that we had spoken about during our prep call. I don't know if we have enough time to tackle that, but maybe in the quickest way possible, what else is kind of still missing, or what other data pipelines are still untapped within the travel space that you are looking to like maybe add, like things that are maybe not as sophisticated right now, but it's definitely going to be informing a lot of the work you do in the future?
I would like to start with one quick example from a real world chat. So there's still a lot of offline content in travel. So I'm thinking about, we had a user who had a really deep conversation with our chat system. They wanted to go to some island, and key to get to that island is to book a certain ferry. So everything has to line up to that one ferry a day in some small place somewhere. And I'm not aware if that content is even online bookable, who has the knowledge, and not really a data pipeline, but a big unlock here is really now when we think about operator, or just as we call it, browser use, right? Because now through the browser use, which is one level above web results, we cannot just use the technology to surface that content, such as like, what's the schedule of that ferry, and then start reasoning, when do I have to start driving to get to that ferry? We may also use the AI browser to book that ticket, if it's online on some way, but not in the classic way online that is like available on any of our sites, but on some small niche shop. And so I think the short answer is there's a lot of still important content that is not as accessible yet.
Yeah, for us, the advantage that we have, I don't know if you are aware, like we have probably the biggest B2B business.
Yes.
We have very different relationships with partners. So we get tons of signals into our database, right? That's one. Second, I think to me the most interesting piece, obviously the inspiration, discovery, and booking is important, but like travel has so many complexities even during your trip. Right? Like, how do you make sure you are there as a companion and continue to listen? And if there are any failed instances, how do you make sure you bring the traveler back and then close, and give an alternative? To me, I think that becomes more and more seamless with this new, agentic world. To me, that is quite exciting.
Honestly, travel and AI is such an exciting space, and we could talk about it a lot. Like, maybe at some point in my life, the next time I look at Instagram and someone's in Greece or somewhere in Europe, because everyone's in Europe these days, I don't have to go through everything just to book it. I'll actually book it. Terrible for the wallet, but fun for the soul. I'd like to thank my panelists for their insights, and yeah, thank you very much, and I hope the rest of you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.